Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Council Chambers on this beautiful August 17th day. And if you've been outside the last couple of days, there is a extreme heat warning, so please make sure you stay hydrated and stay in the shade with yourself and your pets if you're going out, and keep safe. Members of Council, you guys probably have noticed that the flags around the facilities of the town of Stony Plain have been at half-mast the last few days. They're down to pay respect for a fallen RCMP officer. It is a difficult job being in the protective services, and mental health is a huge issue that a lot of our protective services members have to face. So we lost a member, and that is why the flags are half-mast, just to pay respect for that individual. Members of Council, you have an agenda before you. There is an addition of 9.4, which is the our Urban Municipalities Association Board of Directors nomination and vice presidency. Okay. Town Manager, is there anything to add to the agenda?
Your Worship, nothing to add from administrative perspective to the agenda. Maybe just a couple of quick comments. Certainly Council has noticed that we are full-time back in the chambers. You'll see a different setup, members of administration spaced out in the 6 feet separations. I will be working the microphones as per usual. There's a bit of a different setup for me, so bear with me if I take a second or two to cue your mic on. And Your Worship, I think maybe the last comment I would make there is just a quick thank you to our IT staff and our facility staff who, in advance of this meeting this evening, did their level best to get the tech running and also to make sure we're following all the recommendations of our Chief Medical Officer here in Alberta.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, we are spaced out here, so if I can get all members to speak directly into your mics so that it comes to the speakers, and it's also easier for our residents and people that are watching on YouTube to gather a sense of what's going on and what we're saying. Thank you, Town Manager. With that, Deputy Mayor, if we have a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Just hold on a second. Okay. Did you, was your mic on?
Your Worship, we did hear that. 9.4 being a motion to allow for a nomination to stand at the upcoming AUMA conference in September.
Okay, thank you. With that, okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to item number 3 is a public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on items that are not on the current agenda. We've been asking residents to either send in submission through email or contact our executive assistant before 12 a.m. today so that we can get them registered. Town Manager, has anybody registered or sent anything in to be read?
Your Worship, I don't believe so at this time. And again, with a bit of an indulgence, Your Worship, other comment I would make as we move into a bit of a different setup and process related to COVID-19 and distancing and so on, we have been and will be clear with the members of the public that pre-registration is required in the event that they wish to speak before council. I think some of that communication has gone out, and we will be increasing that level of communication to make sure that we have both the allowable and accessible as possible, but maintain the safety for the members here and staff and so on and so forth, as well as for the public, Your Worship. So a bit of a change of process there. We used to allow almost a walk-in, so to speak. We are asking and requiring pre-registration at this point.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, let me just turn your mic on. Okay, go try it.
There's no red light.
You won't see the red light there.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a request of our town manager. Wonder if you could put your screen down just a little bit. You're blocking the sound waves from getting to me, and so that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and as mentioned by the town manager, we are using the mics and playing around them. So again, please speak directly into them and just wait a couple seconds while we figure out where everybody is on the control panel so that we can speak. I think, Deputy Mayor, I have found you. Let me just go through a roll call because we just finished that. There's no public input session. Councillor Myers, can you use the mic, please?
Sorry, what do you need me to say?
There we go, that's enough. Councillor Plechko?
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Loy?
I'm here.
Councillor Matties?
I'm here.
Councillor Laurie?
Hello.
Okay. Sounds good. It looks like everybody's mics is working, so I figured out where everybody is on the control panel, so thank you very much. And then moving on to item number 4, which is presentations and delegations. There are no presentations or delegations set up today, so we're moving on to number 5, which is statutory public hearings. And again, today we don't have any public hearings, so moving on to adoption of council minutes for the RCM of July 13th. Councillor Meyer, go ahead with the motion, please.
Minutes as presented.
Okay. Can I just get you to do that again? Just kind of lean into the mic. Sorry, this is what we have to do now because it's harder to hear. We're a little spread apart.
The Town Council approved the July 13th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. Members of council, you've had a chance to go over and read it. Is there any errors or omissions? Okay, see none on the call question. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1 and 7.2 is the council boards and commission minutes. So 7.1 is the Stony Plain Library and 7.2 is the Meridian Housing Foundation. And the members, you can ask questions and comments on all 3 of those minutes. Councillor Plechko, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council received the council board and committee minutes for information.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding that? We'll start with Councillor Laurie. So,
thank you, Your Worship. A couple of questions. Just the first one to start off with for the Meridian Housing, representative on the Meridian Housing Foundation. I see we have minutes for the June 25th meeting, and those minutes are appearing as a draft, and they are not signed, and I believe it states that the next meeting is not until August. So can we confirm, should we have these minutes as of yet, or are these still draft minutes yet to be approved by the board? Therefore, we should essentially be ignoring them at this point in time. Because I do have some questions on them, but I will refrain if those minutes are not approved as of yet.
okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Bennett as the representative.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I was just going over it in my mind. I don't think we had a meeting in July, which is the reason that these have not yet been approved by the board. So I would suggest we wait until the board sees them and approves them, and I sign off on them before we have any questions on them. If there are any general questions, though, about anything having to do with the Meridian Housing Foundation, I would certainly be prepared to answer those.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, follow up, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, I will wait then until we have the final minutes for the June 25th. I'll hold the questions that I have for those because they're not general, they are fairly specific to that. But I do have 2 questions for the representative of Meridian Housing Foundation from the May 28th minutes. The first being on page 21 of our minute package. It speaks under, or just before, item 5. says Councillor Jackie McQuaig recuses herself at 2:55, and this is just before the capital campaign report and the unfinished business general orders, Folkestone Manor, and she rejoins the meeting at 3:15. Was this a recusal from the topic, or was this just taking a break from the meeting? And if it was a recusal from the topic, can you explain why Councillor Jackie McQuaig would feel the need to recuse herself when sitting as a representative of the Meridian Housing Foundation speaking about a Meridian Housing Foundation project?
Thank you.
Yes, I can try and explain that. We, the Meridian Housing Foundation, received a letter from Parkland County indicating that that the county has not taken a position as of yet when it comes to affordable housing. And so any discussion that the Meridian Housing Foundation Board has on financial or the progress of the Folkestone Manor affordable housing project, that the representative from Parkland County does not feel comfortable and will not, and the county is asking that they be recused during any financial discussions about that project. In other words, the county has no policies concerning affordable housing, and so they do not want to participate in anything condoning or the progression of an affordable housing, the affordable housing project.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the member representing on that. And I find that quite disappointing because, as we've been told many times on many of our boards and committees, when we go and we sit on those boards and committees, our councillor hat comes off and we are there to represent the best interests of those boards and committees. And I believe the Meridian Housing Foundation would be one where they are sitting around that table not representing Parkland County but representing the Meridian Housing Foundation, same as I would expect our member would be representing the Meridian Housing Foundation and not the town of Stony Plain. So I am very disappointed to hear that, but thank you for the explanation. I do have just one last question in respect to the same minutes. On page 23, it speaks to administration continues to have bi-weekly meetings with Colliers, project leaders. Colliers expecting to have a draft review with the first week of June. This is for the housing needs assessment. Can you speak to if this housing needs assessment information is being shared with the tri-regional plan, and if that information is being provided so that they can have a well-rounded look at the housing needs in the community?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to you, to Councillor Laurie. Yes, we have received the final report of that housing needs assessment. The board has not yet met in order to discuss it and to basically discuss it and decide what objectives we're going to cover because of that. I believe, unless the board tells me differently, but I believe that our intention is to share that housing needs assessment with the tri-region and with FCSS and with some of the other organizations that we would like to partner with. In my opinion, the more support we have and the more people that know what that needs assessment says, then the better opportunity we will have in order to progress seniors housing in our area. So when we meet next Thursday, I believe, we will have that discussion.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mattis, you had your hand up.
Page 18 and point 12. My question is for the representative or for administration. With regards to a protective shield, will there be a protective shield at the reception area? Is that being planned with the construction of the library?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gage?
Yes, page 18, 12. It's just a general question. Like they're talking about the construction tender and that furniture, the request for queue, I don't know what that means, for furniture will be released soon. And I'm just wondering, because the town of Stony Plain is requiring protective shields on our reception areas, and also you see that at FCSS, there is one there as well, that is there going to be one at the library? Because I would be concerned that we're not consistent throughout our community.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, our library does have a protective shield at the checkout counter. And so it would be my assumption that in the new library, we would also have one. I think that's too detailed right now for this report and what these minutes are speaking to. But our library has been very proactive when it comes to the protocols for COVID-19. So I'm sure that that's going to be taken into effect at the time of the move into the new library.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councilor Mannies?
I would appreciate if you would go back to your board and ask that specific question, because at the end of the day, we're doing this in the community because there's a concern for security for the people working in our, municipal areas. And so we want to I would believe we would want to make sure that we were consistent.
Mr. Mayor, could I add?
Yes.
Councillor Matties, have you been into the library since it's reopened?
I had to go back to get peaches today for everybody, so I was going to pick up my book and I didn't get to.
Because I would say that the admittance into the library is of the strictest and most stringent of most anywhere that I've been. So I will ask that question, but you can rest assured that if the protocols indicate we will still need one when we move in there, there will definitely be.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for raising that point, Councilor Matties, and thank you, Councilor Bennett, Deputy Mayor, for doing that. And again, I want to make sure that all our facilities and even arm's length facilities such as the new library will be operating and following all provincial health orders. Okay. Anything else on these minutes? Okay. I have a question maybe just then for the Meridian Housing Foundation representative, Deputy Mayor. Just taking a look at throughout this pandemic, there's a lot of changes that are happening. How has the foundation dealt with intake and outtake of these facilities? Being a seniors facility, it's definitely more vigorous, but how is the staff handling that? Yes.
Visitors coming in and out, or?
Yes, for both. Just, yeah, intake and then just kind of visiting. 'Cause I know for a while there, it was closed down that nobody is allowed to come visit. Now, I understand people are allowed to visit, and so how is that going? And definitely extra measures. And then in terms of residents moving in and out, because they do transition in and out, how is the foundation making sure that the residents within the facility are safe during those times?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Meridian Housing Foundation, as well as most seniors housing facilities, I assume, are following the guidelines from our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Dina Henshaw. And as you may know, some of those some of those protocols change rather quickly. And between the other organizations, the colleagues that Meridian Housing Foundation has, they've been working very closely together to try and make sure that every condition that changes are being met as quickly as possible. So when a resident moves in, they are quarantined for 2 weeks. Quarantined to their rooms, meals brought to their rooms. Now, I'm referring right now to the lodge, Mr. Mayor, not necessarily to the apartments, the independent living, although I'm pretty sure that that's the way that would run too. The lodge specifically has very stringent conditions. So I'm just trying to remember because, as you know, every day it seems like there are different measures that have to be taken. So I may not be correct if things have changed recently, but I try and keep up with them. So when it comes to residents having visitors, they are now allowed 4 visitors outside, and they can be of any age. We have one staff member who, don't want to say patrols, but basically patrols to make sure that everyone is following the physical distancing regulations. I believe that people are allowed 2 visitors inside. They do need to let the staff know that they are having visitors come inside. So people are met at the door. They will go through the questionnaire, and they will be given a mask if they don't have one. Those are usually people who the resident says these are the people that they most need to see. So that's how that has been handled. Now, residents are also allowed to leave the Meridian Housing Foundation Lodge at this time to go to their families' homes for get-togethers, barbecues, but we try to maintain that the protocols are followed even in family homes. And if they are not, if we are not sure that they're being met, then we try and discourage people from leaving the lodge. For instance, if there's going to be a great big family reunion, everybody's going to be inside, we would really encourage the residents not to go. If they do go, then there are procedures. When it comes to activities in the lodge, there was a limit of 5 people attending any kind of activity. I'm speaking of some of their exercise classes, movies that are arranged, music activities, things like that. That has been lessened, and so I think it's up to 10 to 15 people that can now go to an activity inside the lodge. Any other specific question that you had, Mr. Mayor, that I did not answer?
You know what? I think Councillor Laurie mentioned about the minutes for June 25th, 2020, and we didn't know if it was draft or approved, and I don't think it really matters at this point because I'm looking at the minutes from May 28th, and the minutes were approved on July 27th. So, and then the next meeting minutes from June 25th, 2020, which is well before the July 27th that was approved. I would guess that this was already been dealt with at your board table. So I'd like to ask a question that I have regarding that, and I'll again then ask Councillor Laurie to ask his questions. Based on what I see on the dates that they were signed, I would assume that this has been vetted over by the board as well.
Okay.
I have a question regarding, where is it? Page 29 of the minutes, regarding the resolution that was made that directed administration to properly compensate all employees for hours worked during COVID-19 for the months of March to June 2020. As a layperson and not involved in the board, I read that as that our employees were not paid for that time. Can you elaborate on that, please?
I can see why you might think that, Mr. Mayor. But what this was indicating is that our administration was working overtime, basically. But because they're in a salaried position, they only get what their salary is. So in other words, we had staff, because the staffing of the facility at certain times was less than ideal. In other words, some of the staff would take a day off, or if somebody had traveled and came back, then their hours would have to be made up by someone. And so our administration jumped into that, and they were doing everything, all the, working in the kitchen, they were cleaning rooms, they would do whatever it was taking. And that was above and beyond what their administration duties were. So we are asking the government to compensate for that above and beyond. So that was what we were getting at is, I believe the provincial government was we were actually keeping track of the hours so that the provincial government would top up the salary of the staff.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. For my question, I refer to page 24 and page 30. My question revolves around some of the transfers that are being done. In the meeting prior, on page 24, it speaks of transfers of $1.2 million from Whispering Waters Manor and $275,000 from Forest Green Manor that are transferred into high-interest investment accounts. But then immediately in the following meeting, we then have transfers back. So this is on page 37.2. We have transfers back out, but it doesn't speak as to whether it's back out from these facilities and these same ones, but it's transfers from building reserves for future building maintenance, or sorry, to building reserves for future building maintenance, but it also doesn't have a dollar figure to it. And so I'm just wondering why in 1 month and one meeting was a significant amount of money taken away from both of these buildings, and then immediately in the next month in the meeting following, it seems like money was brought back. And how come in one meeting we have dollar totals for the transfers, and in the next meeting we don't have dollar totals for the transfers? It's not very clear how much money is moving where for what and for what purpose, and I'm just not sure why money was moved out of buildings if buildings required maintenance.
Deputy Mayor?
So on page 24, when it was referring to the transfers to the high interest, I believe that we were moving that in order to get the better interest rates. I'm just going back to that. Yes. So 7.2 is what you were referring to, interest rates. Service Credit Union has reviewed Meridian Housing Foundation bank accounts and have recommended to move some funds into a high interest rate investment. So we're looking for the best interest rate for those accounts. And then on page 30, I think it was an entirely different thing. Just trying to remember. We did a building condition assessment and decided to move some money into, well, like it says, into future maintenance requirements. So it's not the same money. On the earlier meeting, on page 24, it was referring to money that we have sitting in accounts that needed to earn higher interest. And this is referring to a reserve fund study and to make sure that there's enough money for, to meet all the maintenance requirements. Now, Mr. Mayor, I can get a clearer answer for Councillor Laurie and send that through the email.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the member representative. I would like that clearer picture, because what's confusing me is it would appear that money was taken out of two facilities, which I completely understand the reasoning behind, to earn a higher interest, but almost immediately to have to be turned around to be put back into these facilities. So if they knew that this study was coming, the facility assessment was coming, and if it's not the same money, I'd be interested to understand where the $1.2 million from Whispering Water Manors and $275,000 from Forest Green came from, and what that money was before, if it was not allocated to building reserves for building maintenance, etc. Those are some large amount of monies for this type of an organization.
I will make sure, Mr. Mayor, that I get a more concise explanation for that.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. If you could just also check into that as well, is to, we've seen some specific motions regarding dollars and cents coming from certain accounts. There's nothing here, like is this, if this is for general maintenance requirements, then is there a general maintenance for each set of those buildings? Are they operated and maintained separately, or is it one? Because if it's one, then you don't need to have separate accounts for them all. If you do, then you do.
The accounts for each of the buildings that are owned by Meridian Housing Foundation are kept separately.
Okay. Okay, and then, so then to add to Councillor Laurie's question, then that provides some clarity. But then here on 7.2, on these minutes, it says to transfer some money for maintenance, but doesn't say which account, because as you just mentioned, all those things are separated. So if somebody's following along in the minutes, they can't follow where it's going.
Okay.
Okay, and I appreciate that in an email. Thank you. Okay, members of council, any other questions or comments regarding the 3 minutes? Okay. See none, thank you very much for answering the questions and providing clarity, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate that. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to number 8 is bylaws. We do not have any, so moving on to business items, which is 9.1 is the Planning Advisory Committee. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Miles Dibble, our Manager of Planning, is here to speak to this item.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. It's good to be here for a change. It's been a little while. As you may recall, about the end of last year, we transferred the subdivision authority from the Municipal Planning Commission to administration, and as part of that transition, it left the advisory role that the MPC had been providing vacant. What's before you is a terms of reference to create a board that can provide public input to planning projects and applications. It's intended to set up 5 members, individuals from the community, either residents or business owners, on 2-year terms with optional 1-year extensions. The unique part about this is that the only way that the board can actually get meetings and applications is if council so asks for it. So again, this puts council in the driving seat in terms of if they want the board to provide community input, it allows them to do that. In this case, administration would generally bring this before council as a recommendation, and then council would ask the board for a recommendation. Administration would then pass on the results of that board meeting and their input to council subsequently in a meeting. If there's any further questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of council, we've heard the background presentation. Any questions of clarity and understanding for that presentation? Councillor Mattis, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions in terms of understanding what the role of administration is. So if I look at page 39, and it indicates the Planning Advisory Committee, and on 3-2-4, may not direct administration to perform work that is outside those specified in the terms of reference. The only thing that I see in the terms of reference that would be direction to administration would be to provide the resources for the operation and coordination of the committee. I don't see anything else in there. And I'm just wanting to have clarification that, you know, first of all, could this be said in the positive that may direct administration to do what things? Because I'm not clear as to what administration does and what it could be directed to be done.
Okay. Through Your Worship, to Councillor Mattis, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. One thing I did not say, but is in the report, is that we did actually engage some of the members of MPC. So as part of that dialogue, we got back that there needs to be additional clarity in terms of what they do not do. So in this case, we added that there to make it explicit. Often with MPC, there was a ambiguity regarding if questions could be asked of administration to follow up on this or those sort of questions. So this here is just to make it explicitly clear that administration will come on council's behalf to ask regarding whatever that topic was for input. But in terms of just getting that input, that is what they give, is that feedback and nothing more. So there's no request back from this board to direct administration to anything beyond really just the function and the setup of the board itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. Dibble. 2 questions for you. The first is in respect to the composition. You mentioned it's 2-year terms with an optional or additional years. But what I didn't see, and what typically happens on the stand-up of a committee, is that usually the terms are offset so that there remains some continuity throughout the committee. What I'm looking at here is, even though this is a committee of 5, if we select 5 people to start this year, within the period of 2 to 3 years, we could potentially have a complete turnover, therefore foregoing any continuity. Has there been any consideration in this of offsetting the initial terms to ensure that there is some long-term continuity as this board gets stood up and moves through its first several years?
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, there has, and again, this is some of the good feedback we got from the former MPC members. In this case, what we wanted to do is we wanted to set up a board by which, by default, you get your 2 years. If everything is good and you want to continue on, you're eligible for an additional 1 year to make it 3 initially. And then after that time, we wanted to make it open so that if no one applies by just extension, you can continue on. But with that said, if any new members want to apply after that 3 years, it allows for, it gives priority to new members, just to allow that changeover, I guess. So we've set that up to provide that. It doesn't, I guess, explicitly allow for that, but it's implicitly to enable that. The other aspect we looked at is often you want to make sure that there is new blood on there, and this ensures that there will be after a 2 or 3 year period of time.
Go ahead.
And then just a follow-up, thank you, Your Worship. You mentioned discussions with MPC members. As we know, I believe it's stated in here, it was back in October of 2019 that the MPC was, for lack of better terms, put on pause or disbanded as these terms of reference were developed and as this committee. Many of those members still had existing tenure left on their terms and did not get the opportunity to fulfill their duty that they had put themselves forward for and were selected by council to do so. Will those members be allowed to essentially conclude their commitment that they had made and that they had been selected for with MPC, given that they've essentially lost this last year? Or will they at least potentially be given some level of preference moving forward into the new terms of reference? As you know, that was a little bit of the understanding on there, is that the MPC would be changed into something, not the MPC would be eliminated and something brand new would be stood up in its place.
Your worship to Councillor Laurie, it has been considered. I do know some of the members are interested in continuing on in the advisory role that this sets up. With that said, there's nothing that explicitly gives them preference, but it is definitely something that administration would look at when selecting the members, depending on how many members are initially apply for the positions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Now, I read through this and I was quite happy to see it come forward. It's been a while since it was sort of initiated, so I was happy to see it. And most of everything in here actually I think is very thorough, makes a lot of sense. And so when I asked the question, I'm really looking for maybe just a justification for it. In regards to on page 39, 3.2.4, in regards to the not directing administration, I can appreciate the thought pattern there. It's an advisory board. We're looking for community input. The only thing I would kind of question is if they get the same information that we get, and they're invited to to participate in the same workshops that we do. One thing I might wind up happening is they just give us the exact same input we currently already have. And so the advisory board might not be as useful as it might be. That's not really a question. It's more like a comment, I guess. So I guess that's, if I wanted to challenge you on anything, I'd kind of put that forward and that thought to you and see what you feel about that. Sorry, through you to administration.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer. It's a very good point, and I guess part of the way I look at this is that because this is a board that only receives applications and projects as a referral from council, it would somewhat be council's purview whether or not it would be worthwhile to engage them. So if there was an understanding that, say, a workshop or a session would be held between all of them, yourselves and potentially this board membership, that maybe it's not worthwhile sending to an official meeting and you would just elicit that feedback from that workshop or other session. Again, this is something that can be fleshed out as time goes on and the board becomes a little more established and we have a greater understanding of how that would work.
I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Mattis, go ahead.
or participate in this advisory committee, what is the criteria you would use as administration to make the determination as to who would be on?
Through your worship to Councillor Matties, that's a wonderful question. Somewhat difficult to answer. It's to be determined, I guess, ultimately. In this case, the initial group would be chosen or selected by administration. So individuals like myself and others that are on administration and are familiar with planning applications, we would ask them a series of questions through sort of an interview process, very similar to any of the other boards, to ascertain what level of understanding they have, if they have a broad community perspective. Questions like that would really elicit a better understanding of where they come from and that they seem to represent the community in a broad sense. I think those are the sort of questions that we want to make sure they could address sufficiently.
Thank you.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? Okay. Seeing none. I do have a question in terms of the presentation. I noticed that there was no term length or maximum term served on this. It says it's 2 years plus an additional year after year after year. But a lot of the committees and boards that council is a part of, and we approve those the policies in terms of reference, is sometimes they're 2-3 year terms with then an additional 1 year. Some are 2 years plus 1, and that's all they can serve, and they have to take a break to the next one. Was that considered here, and yes or no? And then why is there no term length here?
Thank you, Your Worship. In this case, it was considered quite heavily. The way we looked at this is that when it comes to representing the community, I don't know if somebody becomes stale or needs to necessarily be replaced if they're representing the community well. So this allows for that longevity, if it makes sense. I may allude to, say, former Councillor Gansky, for example, 40 years on council. A lot of information, a lot of continuality, some of the other questions that other council members have asked. This allows for that to take place. However, it does make priority that if new blood wants to be added to it, it gives them priority overall. So it allows for natural succession if so desired, but if there's nothing, if all the members want to continue and persist on there, it allows for that without having to reapply. So it's really to kind of save on that administration of having to reapply if that's the case.
So just from my understanding, then administration can just reappoint a member of the advisory committee without going out to the public, or like what's currently happening right now is we're asking for people that are interested in boards and committees to join one. So if there's already 5 sitting on there and we have 4 or 5 more people that are interested, but administration feels that the current 4 that are sitting on there, or 5, that they just automatically reappointed, so they don't have to have a kind of, I guess, criteria basis or a matrix basis of who we want on the advisory committee?
I guess, Your Worship, it really automatically allows them to persist. If any of those members have been there for more than 3 years, we would advertise additional placements available. And if anyone applies, they would automatically have priority over any of the longstanding members.
Okay. That's not, I didn't read that there, but then that's exactly the opposite of what you just told me a couple minutes ago when you said if the people are good, for example, Councillor Gansky, 40 years sitting on the council term, that knowledge is valuable. So you just told me that if somebody's sitting there for 3 years, if a new person applies, well, that new person gets priority. So then we should add a term length then, if new people are going to get priority.
Your Worship, sorry for my confusion if I caused any, first and foremost. I guess where I was going is alluding to former Councillor Gansky, what I was really getting at is if there was somebody that was on there for longer, why would we necessarily want them off there if they were able to continue on there and no one wanted to replace them? That's the key part, I believe, is that it's only if someone doesn't want to replace them that they would be able to stay on there for a long period of time. But by default, if there's new members that want to go on the board that apply, after the 3 years, anyone that's on that board can be replaced by a new member based on the way it's set up within the terms of reference.
Okay. Councilor Pletchko, you had your hand up?
Worship. So again, on the same page, page 40, I read this a little bit different than what I'm hearing in this chambers tonight. So I read this as the first part is a 2-year term with the potential for an additional 1-year extension. I didn't read in there that that extension becomes another one, and another one. So I think, listening to what I hear tonight, the terms of reference here need to be much more clear than what they are, because having you explain what you just explained, it also states in here that when 2 members meet the requirements for subsequent extension, the member serving less time on the committee will be prioritized. So I think we're missing a little bit of what needs to be in here. We need to be clear that a new individual, which is what you've explained here once already, that a new individual would be actually given the priority over somebody that is sat on the board. Because I think I could see where we were headed with the experience of former councillor Mr. Gansky. You get somebody on here and administration seems to think that they should stay on there. That person could have a long-term longevity on this particular board without more clarity for what needs to change.
If I may, Your Worship, through Councillor Pletchko, or sorry, to Councillor Pletchko, we can revise the terms for clarity purposes to make that more explicit. Again, the intention and the way that they were set out here, and I believe the way they read, but again, it's just my read of this, is that they prioritize new members after they've served a 3-year term, and it allows, without the requirement to be reappointed, a continued year over year on this committee if no new members so wish to apply. But it does give precedence to anyone applying that's new after the 3 years. Again, we can refine them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not, sorry, when I read this, I read the 1-year extension, and then when you get down a little bit further, if there's that 1-year extension and there's 2 of them applying, the person that's had less time on will get priority over the person that's been there longer. So I'm not seeing clarity in listening to what I've heard today. I don't understand that clarity. So for me, this leaves too many holes where you would not be able to appoint somebody new within the community if you have somebody that wanted to stay that was long-term.
Okay.
And it's quite a bit different than most of our standing committees where there is a period of time where you actually have to be off and then you get to go back on, right?
It is somewhat innovative on that note. I guess just for clarity, for any subsequent extension, a member must is really what it's talking about for any additional 1-year extension, and they need to meet the criteria below that follows. But again, we can revise the wording to make that more explicit.
Okay. Just before I move on to Councillor Loy, I think so that second paragraph, Councillor Pletchko, it is extensions. There's an S after that extension, so that I would read that as they can have more than one extension when you're. So I think that's where the administration is coming back with that. And then you are correct about the 2 members. If both of them are due, the one with the less number of time will get appointed to the committee, and then those with 2 of the same, then their name is recommended to the council to decide. Councillor Loy?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just going to reiterate some of what you said in Councillor Pletchko. I think, Mr. Dibble, what you're hearing here from several members of this council, that there's too much ambiguity in the membership, section 4, and I would encourage you to take that back and revisit it. I think it'll just clarify some things, because we don't want murky waters down the road. I think we want to be able to understand it and make the system work better. I do see some problems, potential problems that would come, and so and to follow the mayor's advice and take a look at what the other ones and set in some kind of timeframes that every other board that I've been on has for our volunteers. I just encourage you to do that, and we'll see what happens from there. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Dibble.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Loy. Any other questions of clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, when I read it and listening to this discussion, what's apparent to me is that the administration is taking on a lot of responsibility for choosing the members of this committee, and throughout their time, the extensions, and so on one hand, it seems like that would be the easiest and the most, the most competent way to do this. But as a person who's been involved in a lot of appointments, I know the kind of consternation, the kind of conflict that can come up unless it is very, very clear. This is your term. You can apply again. I don't think there's anything in here that says about applying again. So when you have a term and it's a four-year term with a 1-year extension. So it's very clear then. And then if the person doesn't want to apply again, they don't have to apply again. But if they want to serve their 5th term, but somebody new comes along, and so according to this, if somebody new comes along, then that person won't be able to fulfill another term. And I just know that that is going to cause some hard feelings, and especially when it's not very specific as to exactly what's going to happen. I think in writing this, maybe administration thinks that, this is the way it'll work. Of course it'll work this way. It's our committee. But it won't work that way, because people will get upset unless you have clear guidelines and a clear method to resolve conflicts. So when I'm listening to everyone here tonight, already there are coming up questions. Well, what if this person, and what if that person? And administration could keep the same person on for years and years because they like him and they do what they're supposed to do. So again, I think that that really needs to be clear for administration's protection and for the committee's efficiency.
Thank you. Councillor Matties?
Just a question with regards to the citizen at large board member selection policy. Does this policy provide some additional guidance here that we're not seeing in this with regards to a selection, and then basically the ability to reapply that process?
Through your worship, to Councillor Matties, it does. It does actually specify the process by which all members at large or public at large boards members are able to be selected. It lays out kind of the procedure, if you would, for that process.
So if I may then follow up, so what could be added from that to this that would provide greater clarification?
Your worship, Councillor Matties, I guess part of it was not to duplicate the wording of that policy, so that this was separate from that, so that it allowed it to function, not to repeat any of the words per se within that procedure, because that procedure's already been established. So again, this here is just to utilize that procedure as opposed to reiterate it directly.
Okay, so thanks for the questions and questions for clarity and understanding. I'm going to move to a motion, and then council may alter that if they like, or they can let this go and see how it works for the next couple of years. I'm going to move to Councillor Lloyd, please. Motion, please. It's on the screen.
Yes, the town council approved the planning and advisory committee terms of reference and have administration implement them as part of the 2021 selection process for citizen at-large boards.
Sorry, can you do that again? Your mic was off.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I move the town council approve the planning advisory committee terms of reference and have administration implement them as part of the 2020 selection process for citizen at-large boards.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Loy. So members of council, we've had the presentation, we've had some questions of understanding and clarity. There are some angst regarding how the membership and the extensions work. I'll open up the floor for questions, debate, and subsequent motions to alter and change. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. While I can appreciate some of the comments that were made about the wording and how it appears, I think what we're getting stuck on is that this is wording and something that doesn't necessarily appear in a lot of our committees. And what it actually prevents is empty seats on the committee. What the wording that is in place here is, the intent of it to do is to essentially state if there is no new suitable candidate available, then the option for a continuation of an expired term exists. We have several boards and committees where we have experienced a member gets to the end of their term and we put a call for nominations out to the community and we receive 0 nominations. So at that point in time, we have a choice. Either the board stays short and continues to operate short until the next year's round of recruitment, or we continue to keep that recruitment process open and invest time and energy and money into trying to attract new people from the community to join the board. While I agree that it is desirable at every given point in time to have some change in our committees to ensure that many residents get the opportunity to serve the town in different ways and many residents get the opportunity to see, I would much rather see somebody be able to continue on in a position on a committee if no other candidate was available, rather than see that seat go empty. So while I can appreciate the comments that were made this evening from my colleagues here on council, I really think it would be amiss to send administration back to do more work on this, because simply all they have done is put in a measure of protection to ensure that there are always 5 members in the seats. And I think that's a very fair and a very honorable thing for them to do, and I appreciate the fact that administration took that extra step to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie, for your comments. I would agree with your comments, but would it make it more simple and easier for everyone to understand if it's just a 2-year term period with no term limit? So if a person has finished their 2 years and they like it, they can continue to apply again. So as you mentioned, if they're still a good candidate, they will still be chosen. If there's nobody else to submit their name besides this one person, they will be chosen. So do we need to have this? Because this is, from what my understanding, what I've read this, it is confusing, because if I have, I think is mentioned here, if we have 5 excellent people sitting on the Planning Advisory Committee, one is coming up to a 4-year term and one's coming up to 5, if both of them apply, plus a new member, well, the new member is going to get in, and the one with 4 years is going to get in, but one of the 5 is going to get kicked out. Is that fair, or should it be based on their ability to sit on the commission and the committee to provide input? Councillor.
Thank you, essentially stating that when you have served 2 years, should there be other candidates who put their name forward who are not currently serving, they would then be given the opportunity and your term essentially would be up. However, if there are not, you are not at a hard term limit where you are ineligible to continue serving if there is a vacancy. And so again, I see this as, it is not limitless. This is a soft limit that provides a balance on both sides of the scale. It provides the opportunity for turnover on the committee so that there can be a continued varied perspective, but it also allows for the continuation to avoid the predicament of having an empty seat.
Any other questions and comments? Okay, seeing none, there is a motion on the floor. There is some debate, so if I see no more hands up, I don't call the question. Actually, Councillor Loy, would you accept a friendly amendment?
Most certainly I would, Your Worship.
I would just ask that with this, that, where is the motion? I would just add, after your motion, is that these terms of reference be brought back to Town Council in 3 years to review. That will give us an opportunity as administration to see how the 2-year limit has gone and then the soft 1-year extension. If that's a friendly, then I do not need to pass the chair over to Deputy Mayor.
It's accepted as friendly.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd, for accepting that as a friendly. Members of Council, so the motion has changed slightly. Is there any debate on this motion?
Worship, is that being typed in so that we see the current motion?
Yes, thank you very much. Administration, how are we at with amending that?
I think we're working on it, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. And we'll just take a
To be
little.
able to just lean over and see what was going on, but I can't do that anymore.
Usually when it's amendment and it's motion, you have actually a couple minutes to write it in before you go. So it's. Councillor Loy, is that okay?
Yes, Your Worship, that's satisfactory.
Okay. So members of council, so the motion has just altered just slightly, just to have administration bring this back in 3 years so that we can review it. Okay. Any debate? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 9.2 is the mandatory face coverings. Go ahead, administration.
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. Council has received a report in the package speaking to a good deal of the background information, both background on COVID-19, background on some of the implementation steps taken by the Government of Alberta, some information from the town of Stony Plain as well. The further information included in the report, Your Worship, is a draft bylaws or ones that are in effect. Certainly, I think City of Edmonton, and as well as our adjacent neighbors over in Spruce Grove, who I believe are debating their bylaw this particular evening. Your Worship, it wasn't my intent to spend a great deal of time speaking about the masks themselves, the rationale behind one way or the other. I know certainly this has been a significant topic for all of us for 6 months. I know that in this particular province and region, it's been a pretty significant topic over at least the last 4 weeks. Your Worship, what's in front of you tonight is background information Should this particular council wish to see a bylaw brought for debate, that would take a motion of council this evening. This report is for information only at this point in time. Your worship, as time has gone by, I believe there has been more steps taken by some of our regional neighbors and as well as throughout the province. So I believe the intent would be, should council see fit, a bylaw would be tabled, I believe, in a special meeting next Monday, at which point in time that particular bylaw could receive all 3 readings and be, in effect as of the 3rd passing. Your worship, I will stop there. I know that there's a good deal of information in this report. I know that there's a good deal of information available to council via the news and other forms of media. I can certainly speak to what would happen directly in the town of Stony Plain, but will not try to speak to the science behind the use of masks and so on and so forth. I believe that's best left to experts in that field. I'll stop there, Your Worship. Certainly can answer any questions or provide further commentary about potential implementation steps and strategies and so on and so forth, should council wish to see fit to approve a bylaw requiring mandatory face coverings within Stony Plain.
Okay. Thank you very much, and appreciate the background information and write-up. It's very informative and thorough of what's happening in our region and since the outbreak of the pandemic. Members of the council, any questions of clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one thing that I'm not quite sure on. If there is a special meeting, I believe town manager mentioned next Monday, is there any opportunity for the public to speak to council in an open council meeting?
So, public input?
Your Worship, you mean to turn that around between today and next Monday, I think would be somewhat challenging to either A, get the word out, or to have the public in attendance via virtually and or, in person, so to speak. That's not to say it can't be done. That's a pretty short time frame to go out to the public, seek their input, ask for their time to come down, so on and so forth. I'll stop there, Your Worship.
Okay. Follow-up?
I'm just wondering what it would take in order to have some public input on this bylaw.
In terms of that, you can...
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, just a question that just popped into my head. Have any of these other municipalities that have already passed bylaws, were any of those, did any of those allow for public input in a formal manner, such as a public input or a, public meeting?
Your Worship, I don't believe that was the case. I know in our report we do have, there was a survey completed by our local Chamber of Commerce. We have the numbers there for Spruce Grove, Strathcona. I did check the City of Leduc's website today. They're tabling a report this evening as well. Their numbers for Leduc, 46% yes, 54% no. And Your Worship, respectfully, I think if we were to do any public input, we would align pretty closely to, a 50-50 split. That seems to be the stuff that I've seen. When asked directly, yes, no question, it seems to be pretty close to that 50-50 margin for and against mandatory masks. So at no point would I wish to disrespect that process. I just believe that that process would probably lead us to the same conclusion that you're seeing across the metro region, if not across Alberta.
Yes, so thank you very much. And yes, to Deputy Mayor, there has not been any public input session in the other municipalities that have debated it. They've debated it as a council with information that's provided. And the most input that they have received is to just a survey. And I would concur with the town manager that if we did our own survey, it'd be very similar to the ones that Spruce Grove did, the Greater Parkland did, Strathmore County, and we just heard the results of City of Leduc, which was 46% in favor and 54% not.
Mr. Mayor, I think my point is that the people of Stony Plain want their voices heard. So in whatever manner that takes, emails to council, in some way, we can always look at the results and say, yep, this is the way it's shaping up. But I think people want their particular voice heard. And that's the only thing I'm pointing out here, is that if we just go along and go, well, this is what everyone else's community is saying, then we haven't directly heard from our public. And that concerns me a little bit. People want to say what they want to say. And I would rather hear it directly than hear it through social media. If it, if reading the Facebook posts are what it takes to get people's voices heard, then I suppose I can read those posts. But in my mind, even some kind of communication to say, council is looking for your input, email a counselor, or email, am I making clear what I'm trying to say, Mr. Mayor? Is that I just think that the public wants their voices heard. Yep. And I'm not certain as to how that can happen in a relatively short time, but I think that the opportunity needs to be there.
Okay, so I think you make a good point, Deputy Mayor. I think I've taken the opportunity every time I've been out for a walk to talk to residents that are walking back and forth on Main Street, and also when I go shopping as well, to see who's wearing masks, who's not, and what they feel about that. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm getting some of my input as well, in terms of looking at, do we want to fill the chambers, have everybody come and say? I 100% agree that we'll only have a 50-50 split, pretty close to it. So everything that you hear in the media, on TV, I think that will still be reflective in our community as well. Would you be happy with doing a survey, which then gets other, do you like face coverings, yes or no, which has most communities doing the same thing? Councillor Loy?
Yes, Your Worship, and I have a question regarding the survey that was taken by the Greater Parkland Chamber of Commerce. Was there a question in that survey asking if they were a resident of Stony Plain? I'm not clear on that. Can anybody answer that?
Yes. Does somebody remember? I believe when I did the survey, it was, do you live in the region or not? Right, which is very similar to the city of Spruce Grove. They had, if you're in the region or not. And then I think some of the other chambers have done, do you shop here? How often do you shop here? And
okay, it's disappointing. That would have helped us out there if we had that. We could have said that, I think there was 922 participants in that survey. If we could have said that 70% of them are something like Stony Plain residents or whatever, but we don't have that information. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that I think all of us are watching social media very, very closely. We all have our sources of information from our friends and those who decide they want to contact me as opposed to somebody else, or some other counselor as opposed to me. I think really our community is communicating with us. We are saddled with a short time frame. We cannot put things out there and wait, like 4 or 6 weeks or something like that. This is upon us today. So for me personally, I'll be satisfied, and again, we can encourage our people, maybe through our communications, that let them know that we are going to be having our meeting on this coming Monday, and now's your time to contact one or all or none of your council members and voice your opinion.
Okay. Councillor Matties?
Support what Councillor Bennett, or Deputy Mayor Bennett, is saying. The reason I say that is the Angus Reid poll that was conducted on July 2020. It was a Canadian poll, and the result basically says Canadians are reluctantly wearing masks as support for mandatory masking climbs. It says every province except Alberta and Saskatchewan registered over 70% support for mandatory masking laws. In Alberta, it was 60%, and in Saskatchewan, it was 55%. So 67% of Canadians support wearing masks in public places indoor. 27% were against, and 6% were not sure. Of those not wearing masks, 25% of the respondents said they were not wearing masks because they forgot. 74% pointed to discomfort, lack of concern for catching COVID-19, a perceived ineffectiveness of the mask, and because others are not wearing them. The poll found men are much less likely to wear masks, and the majority of women across all age brackets are wearing masks when they leave home. The national concern today is that the threat is at its highest point since April 2020. And the note of this report, it said Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, he said he supports wearing a mask, and he cites the risk to further economic downturn if we don't. So my comment is I don't see that there is a rush for Monday to make a decision. I would like to hear more from our community, whether that's through social media. I've heard from people in my neighborhood who have told me they would like to see masks in public places, indoors. So I'd like to hear a little bit more from our community.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of comments. I will agree, obviously, hearing directly from our community is a benefit. We have 2 surveys included in our council package that include our community. Both the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber of Commerce surveyed members of our community, and the City of Spruce Grove's survey very specifically has a section where it asks if you're not from the City of Spruce Grove but you participated. And I believe it was close to 1/3 of their survey respondents did not live in the City of Spruce Grove but frequented the City of Spruce Grove for shopping, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it'd probably be fair to say that there was a large portion of those that were residents of the town of Stony Plain. However, in saying that, the Chamber did theirs over 2 or 3 days. City of Spruce Grove did theirs over 4 or 5 days. They received very, very high levels of engagement and input, and they can be done on incredibly simple platforms like SurveyMonkey. It would take next to absolutely nothing for administration to put together a 3 or 4 question survey very similar to the likes of what Spruce Grove or the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber of Commerce did. Put that out to our community. I would hazard a guess that I would like to think we could have one out as quick as probably tomorrow afternoon and give our residents several days worth of time to provide the feedback. But in all honesty, I don't think we need it. I think we've heard loud and clear through these 2 surveys that are included here, through the different information that's going through the media about how the general public feels about masking, through our individual conversations that we have had with our constituents in the town, and just general in passing, the emails, the phone calls, etc., that we've received. We've had the conversation. And I will say that I'm hearing very much the same. It is a rather 50-50 split. But what I will say is that when it comes to education, we are doing an incredibly poor job. If you look at something as simple as Instagram, and you look at the City of Spruce Grove and the way that they are communicating to their residents, on a very regular basis, they have messaging going out through their communications that speaks to the proper etiquette. Now, yes, we know it's all been drilled into us left, right, and center, 6 feet social distancing, wash your hands, cover your cough, etc., etc. But reminders never hurt. The City of Spruce Grove has also gone even further. They have specific things on their social media and that they've communicated out to their public about things like etiquette on trails. So if you're walking, or if you're cycling, or doing any of those type of activities, what it looks like, what your distancing is supposed to be for that. How to behave on things like public transit, which no, we don't have at this time. But again, it's expansive. I took a quick look, and going back to July 1st, there's not a single solitary post on the town's Instagram, for example, that speaks anything about COVID in respect to public expectations and in respect to common courtesy and how we should be working with our own community members to ensure we stay safe. Not one post in over 6 weeks. And that was just on one of the social media platforms. And that was only me looking back to July 1st. I haven't looked back to when this pandemic started. I haven't looked on Facebook and on Twitter on those, but I'd hazard a guess that I'd see the same thing. What I have seen is a few little signs on our white message boards throughout the community about keeping our community safe. And that's great, but since when did it not become our responsibility to have direct communications to our residents about the measures that they can be taking, about voluntary mask compliance? What I am seeing, and I will reference this weekend in Spruce Grove, I actually saw a massive amount of voluntary compliance for mask wearing inside buildings. And I was quite impressed. And I had likened that to a lot of the education that's going on and the fact that their council is discussing and debating a mask bylaw. What I like about Spruce Grove's mask bylaw as well, that we see a copy of, which they have not adopted yet, but in speaking with several of their councillors, I do fully believe that after their meeting tonight, they will have a mask bylaw adopted, is that it isn't a sweeping bylaw. It is a bylaw that has certain trigger points for it to be enacted and that has certain trigger points for it to be rolled back. And that's their case numbers and falling into the watch list on AHS. Not saying that those numbers are the numbers that are the best numbers to go by, but it at least doesn't just take it and say, thou shalt wear a mask until we say thou shalt not. It at least gives some tangible numbers to it. So do we need to go out to our residents and get that feedback? Maybe, maybe not, but it'd be pretty easy to do, and we'd get that information back pretty quick. Do we need to do a better job at communicating to our residents what they can do without needing a bylaw in order to help keep each other safe? You bet we do. And I certainly hope that after this meeting, we see a significant change in that very quickly.
Thank you, Councilor Laurie. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, so their motion is number 9.2. If I can have Councilor Matties, please.
That Town Council accept the report on mandatory masks and face coverings for information.
Okay, thank you. So this, again, is for information for council to see what's happening in the whole metro region and what's happening with our neighbors directly to the east of us. This is for information, and if council would like to debate further regarding to have a bylaw or not, that'd be a subsequent motion. We can also put a time for it. If not, we can put parameters of what we want to see when it comes back for our next meetings in September. Okay. Any questions or comments on the motion? No. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm not seeing in this motion anything about a special meeting. So, and it was mentioned in our backgrounder, but at what point do we talk about a special meeting?
At the point after we accept this, and if council decides to put a motion on the floor to debate for a special meeting to bring a mask bylaw back or to do a survey and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So this is just for information that is provided for us of the facts and what's happening in our region.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that clarification.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, administration, for your report. I don't see any more hands up, but it is a good report, and it does show you what's happening throughout our capital region of going mandatory mask or not. I would concur that voluntary compliance is a lot better than forced compliance. People will buy in and do it because it's for the greater good, not because they're told to do it. We're always going to have a few percentage of the population that will not do it regardless if you tell them to do it or not. We also know that by following news with Edmonton's mandatory face bylaw, there's been a whole bunch of loopholes, and it's causing lots of issues for their staff and time in terms of exemption cards. And it is also referenced here in the information that there's so many reasons why you don't have to wear one. So who polices that? Like, for example, if I walk into a facility in Edmonton and I say I have health issues that prevent me from wearing a mask, they have to let me in because I'm exempt. So when we talk about making bylaws, which is good for our residents, we have to think of the rationale and practical practice. How do we do this? Councillor Laurie made a really good point about education. Maybe that's where we start. Right? Because if we educate our residents, we know our residents are compliant. They want to do the right things. And I also believe that we already have a provincial mask bylaw issued by the Chief Medical Officer, which I don't have a degree in medical science. I don't think anyone else on this table has it. But that order is, if you cannot maintain 6 feet, wear a mask. There's your mandate, there's your order. So that's just my thoughts. It is for information. I will support this for information, and I think I will support a motion to educate our residents and maybe do a little more of that before we debate a full-blown mask bylaw. Okay, so then the motion is to accept for information. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Members of council, you've read the reports. And you heard what the town manager said. So if we want to do something more in terms of education, in terms of maybe considering a bylaw or getting a survey out, we need a motion. Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Your worship, and forgive me, I don't have one worded at this exact moment. But I would like to move that Town Council directs administration to begin an educational campaign advising residents of best practices to avoid the transmission of COVID-19 within our community, and to conduct a survey of our residents to determine their input on a potential face covering bylaw.
Thank you. And then may I add that that survey come back to our September meeting? Or do you want to just leave it up to administration to when they get enough?
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm just looking at a calendar. Since our first meeting is not until September...
So it'll come to the GNP because it is for information?
Yes, September 8th GMP.
Then at that time, if council wants to, then we can actually make a motion to bring a bylaw back to the next RCM.
Your Worship, I believe that is too far in advance. We're looking at, that's 3 weeks from today. I think this issue is pressing. I do think we will see by the end of this evening the likely action that is going to be taken next door. I do feel that I would like to see this information come back to council much sooner than September 8th. I would feel that sometime the week of September 24th, whether this information is to be brought to council in some type of a special meeting, which then we might look at the information and the knowledge of what Spruce Grove has done and potentially look to direct a bylaw at that point in time. I think at that point in time, we could also hear from administration as to what their plan is for an educational campaign and how that is to be rolled out and what we are to see. And that will help us decide whether we do need to address this sooner or whether we feel that the actions that administration is taking and the feedback from our community states we can continue to wait a little bit longer.
Okay, so we will Administration, do we need to add like the week of September 24th or?
Your worship, so if I understand the proposed motion is to develop some education information, so to speak, conduct a community survey, and have that back in the chambers. I'm hearing as quick as possible, so to speak, but your worship, you know, for us to make the August 24th special meeting, I think that could be a challenge in that we generally try to, you know, I mean, get the data in, do whatever interpretation, write reports, so on and so forth, and have them out to council, you know, with a reasonable amount of time to review. For us to do that all, you know, by Thursday this week, I think is going to be difficult. To put the meeting, I'm thinking out loud, your worship, frankly, to put the meeting a little bit further later in the week may allow for at least that sort of 7 days-ish of community survey. You know, and to, then after that, you'd be looking at the week following, which I don't have the calendar in front of me, but it'd be the week after the 24th.
How about we just settle on Wednesday, October 26th? August, sorry. Yes.
I didn't say September.
Honestly, I think we've had this discussion and administration.
Your mic's not on. I can't hear you.
Okay.
It's on now.
Good, Councillor.
Do you want me to start over?
Sure.
Did you hear any of what I was saying? So I think that the week that we've been talking about, we've had a bit of a discussion prior to. I'm not quite understanding why we could not get something out to the public. I just looked back on Facebook as far as I could look, and you're absolutely right. There is no conversations from our department regarding anything that talks about COVID within our community. So I think we're way past the point of needing extensions and extra time. And, you know, I feel myself that this is quite important. I've traveled around a lot the last little while, and I've noticed lots of communities, especially in the northern part of Alberta, have allowed businesses to choose whether there's a mask needed or not. And there is businesses out in the local communities that are doing that. So through their education on lots of that area, it's promoting the safety of using a mask while letting the people choose who does it. And the longer we delay this, the longer we are falling behind everybody else in their areas. So from my point of view, I think it's, I like the date of the 24th. I think it's, we've had that discussion a little bit along the way here prior to, and I think that gives us ample time to get this out through communications.
Okay. So thank you for your input, Councilor Fletcher. So back to Councilor Laurie. So I was trying to figure out a time with you because this is your motion.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will provide clarity. As Councilor Fletcher mentioned, yes, my intention in this motion is that the educational materials start immediately. I would love nothing more than to see some type of a public awareness COVID educational post from our communications department as early as tomorrow. That would be absolutely fantastic. I think it would be a huge benefit for our community. As I mentioned, I believe when I had my first comments, the chamber survey was open for less than 72 hours, and the City of Spruce Grove survey was open from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for a meeting that occurred on Tuesday. So I don't believe that we would need to have the survey closed by Thursday in order to have some type of information prepared for us for Monday the 24th. I think if we could have a simple SurveyMonkey 3-4 question survey prepared for Tuesday. Those surveys, by the way, also allow for free comment. So if you remember, we did receive a document from Sarah Perry, the Chamber Executive Director, that showed every single individual response, whether they supported or opposed the mask bylaw, whether they were or were not already that survey close by, say, end of day Thursday, I would like to think that we should be able to receive that Sunday, Friday. So I would be supportive of maintaining that bookmark in our calendar of 9 p.m. on August 24th. For a follow-up meeting in which we could receive the data from the survey and receive an update from communications on the communications plan they have enacted and that they will be looking to use going forward for COVID-19 education to our public.
Okay, so then just to clarify, your motion here is that town council moves back, so that town council direct administration to start an educational correspondence, right? Programming of best practices through our social media channels, and then to conduct a survey of should or should not we have face masks as a mandatory face mask within our community, and to have a special meeting on September 24th at 9 a.m.
Yes, and in that special meeting to bring the survey results and the results of Spruce Grove's bylaw from this evening's meeting that they are having, so that we are aware of what the adopted bylaw in Spruce Grove is.
Yeah, so the survey results and then also the education program.
Yes.
August 24th. Okay, it is August 24th, 2020. Okay, and this is actually a very good motion, and I do think it does touch on a lot of bases of trying to get a feel of our community and volunteer compliance. Okay, so while they're wordsmithing that, I accept the motion, and then I'll open up the floor for questioning and debate. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification. It says for debate, call a special council meeting to debate. Will we also have a vote at that time?
No, I believe it is to report on what the findings of the survey was, to report on what our staff are doing in terms of education process of programming through our social media channels to the residents, and then also then have a notice of what happened to the City of Spruce Grove Council from August 17th, because today they're debating their bylaw. So it is for us for information. So that's, and then from that point, as Councillor Laurier has mentioned, we can see if we need to move forward with the mandatory mask bylaw, or are we okay as a community following the provincial health orders and moving forward from there. Councillor Meyer?
Yes, just a comment on regards to the survey. I'm fairly confident that the people that answer yes to wearing a mask, it may not be necessarily as important in getting compliance in the future. I think understanding specifically what people find, offensive or restrictive about a face mask would be more important, and I would challenge administration to focus their questions on that, in that end. And specifically, I wouldn't mind also knowing, without telling administration exactly how to build the survey, I wouldn't mind knowing exactly our residents' opinion on a bylaw that, like Spruce Grove, is triggered on a certain number. So I think that would be very useful.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Councillor Loy, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm reading this over and over in my head here. I'd like to see the public have input into it. I'm certainly not against that in any way, shape, manner, or form. I again say, though, that we have had public input. I agree with Councillor Myers there that there's probably two parts to this question about wearing of a mask, which would be a voluntary thing, and secondly, do they want a bylaw dictating that? I think that's an important, if I understood your comments. But I'm I believe in education, and I think we should put it out, but man alive, if the people in our community don't know tonight what they're supposed to do, after everything that's been on the TV, the radio, the newspaper, social media, I don't know who you're going to reach out to. We've been telling people, the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal governments have been telling people for 4 or 5 months what to do. So while I agree, yes, there's a measure or some merit in it, to the education, and I think, as you say, we can put up a topic, as to say, what to do in parks or when you're doing this or under that. Looking for the compliance voluntarily. But if they don't know by now, I don't know what we're going to do that's going to be rocket science is going to get that message out. And I don't want to sound facetious, but that's my comments, sir.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Loy. Moving on to Councillor Matties, please.
With regards to compliance, I think, we look at recycling in our community, and we were able to launch just an excellent educational program with a mascot that made it fun for people. And, I don't know if this education campaign, I hope, continues for a longer period of time and can evolve into maybe something that just reminds us of good practices moving forward and that people will engage in and relate to. So I think that's really important, is that we make it personable and something that all ages will engage with, as we did with our recycling program.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Okay. That's very good. Okay, any other questions, comments on the motion? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Laurie, for bringing this motion up forward, and I think that captures what our conversation has been around this evening. That does allow input from our residents and allows council to take a look at what is happening out there. And again, COVID-19 is a very contagious virus that we do not have a cure for yet. And so we're looking forward to seeing what that is, and hopefully that there is a vaccine built sooner than later. I do look forward to the report. So the special meeting is August 24th at 9 a.m. for receiving the results. Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, and before we move on to 9.3, let's take a little break here. So we'll just take a recess break for 10 minutes. We'll see everybody back in 10 minutes. Thank you. our agenda items. It is now 9.3, which is the 2020 second quarter report. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I believe Council is familiar with this report and the general information that's contained within it. The only comment I'll make initially, Your Worship, and then certainly we're able to answer any questions or provide further commentary on some of the items. I think this is the report where you start to see the impacts of COVID-19 on operations, and some of the numbers and so on and so forth are contained there. Some of the communication that was done, and that's probably, you know, I mean, if there's a theme in this one, that would be my comment. It's where you start seeing some of those impacts showing up in our operations. So, Your Worship, I'll stop there. Staff are present. We will try to provide any answers or further commentary that Council may require.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation on the second quarter report. Moving on for questions of clarity and understanding. Moving on to Councillor Lloyd, please.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Town Manager, for this report. I thoroughly enjoy reading them. It gives us a snapshot and an update and brings us current to what's going on. I did have one concern, though, when I looked at page 91 of 250, and the alarms, and this would be fire response by category. That seems to have taken really quite a jump, and I'm just going to, I don't need an answer on it or anything like that, Your Worship, but it does, that's a tremendous amount of resources that are being used up at that particular point in time, and I don't know whether something can be done to mitigate that. False alarms like fees or anything like that, but I noticed it and it was extremely high, and it's concerning. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, so noted the alarms. Does the Minister have anything to say regarding the number of increased alarm calls?
Your Worship, I can't speak specifically to the increase or the rationale or what the main issue there, but certainly Councillor Lloyd brings up a point in that anytime our emergency services are responding, you know, I mean, there's a couple of impacts there, so to speak. You know, our equipment's out, it's moving. You know, I mean, there's inherent risk anytime our emergency response, responds to a call. There are communities out there that have some form of, you know, false alarm call. I don't know if you go by law necessarily, but fees associated with and so on and so forth. You know, I know it's tracked, I know it's understood. At this point, Your Worship, again, I can't speak specifically to it, but it is something that administration is keen of. That's why we track it and try to understand what's happening or not happening along those lines.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laurie, if you can just give me a second to have the Town Manager turn on your mic. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to Councillor Loy's comments, actually, what I find confusing is we don't know if this is an increase or not. If you look at a lot of the charts that appear through this report, what you actually see is comparisons of past years to current, or past quarters to current. This report doesn't show you any of that. It shows you what our current numbers are, but it doesn't show you how that compares to numbers past. So for example, the chart on page 90 shows you the 2020 responses. It shows you the split between Stony Plain and Parkland County, but it doesn't show us what the 2019 responses or earlier were for that same time period. So therefore, we don't actually know whether our responses are up or our responses are down. And I can tell you just by doing the averages and looking at the numbers that I remember from last year's and from what we're looking at this year, our trend is actually down. We're on pace to do about 50 or 60 calls less in 2020 than we did in 2019. But we can't tell that from this report. Same if we go down to the chart on page 91, which was referenced in respect to the alarm calls. Coming from working in the fire service before, alarms are an incredibly common call. So it's not surprising at all to see this statistic with the alarm calls so high. But again, what we don't see is how that compares to trend. We don't see that as a comparison to the second quarter of 2019 or as a comparison to even the first quarter of this year. So the charts and the data that we see are only as good as the full comprehensive set of data that we receive. And I don't feel that these charts are actually showing us any comparative data to tell us whether this information has any benefit to us or not. Does this tell us that our department is busier? Does it tell us that our department isn't busier? Does this information tell us that there is one call type that is more prevalent over others, that is something new and not something that is just the norm for the industry? So hopefully when we see these reports come forward in the future, we can make sure that not only does it include data, but it also includes comparative data so that it's easier for us to understand what the data is telling us. Because data without information behind it is just that, it's data. You can make it say whatever. We could say, man, those grass and brush fires are huge. Well, what were they in Q2 of last year? I bet you they were the same, because quarter 2 is what's typically known as grassland wildfire season. So I think we need to do a better job in these reports of ensuring we have those comparisons so that we understand the data, not just the raw numbers.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And members of council? Councillor Matties, just give me a second. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few comments. One of them is with regards to economic development, and I had shared a story with Council earlier about a community that I read about in a newspaper article that had eliminated its economic development department until Council had time to reimagine it, to have a new vision for the economic development arm of the community. And as I'm looking through this report, and I see on page 84 of 250, if the size of the information in here reflects the importance or significance of a function, then economic development had one little tiny slice of this on page 84 with two of the components of it talking about the mayor's task force. And so when we talk about what a function is doing in our community in the town of Stony Plain, if that economic development arm is very strong and functioning in this community, then why does it receive 1/4 of a page when I'm looking at police reports, I'm looking at fire, I'm looking at communications department, 3-4 pages in this report? So I'm going back to administration. I've asked for a review of certain departments, you know, when we talk about just as we grow as a community. But more importantly, as we're dealing with COVID and change moving forward, we need to be taking a look at what our economic development is doing, what the role of that is moving forward, and you know, and then how that also plays with regards to regional initiatives like Edmonton Global. My second comment is related to, if I go to the budgets, and those are on page 102, 103. And my comments are quite similar to Councillor Laurie when we're talking about looking at past reports. First of all, the consistency of the information that we receive. This report provides an unaudited partial statement of operations. And does not include a budget. The other one, back to 2019, I had not only a unconsolidated statement of operations, but I also had a balance sheet. So now it's not in this one. So how am I supposed to compare financial information in this community with, number one, if I can't even see what happened last year in many cases, and secondly, I don't have the same documents. So the role of council, as I've just taken a course through the elected official education program on planning, corporate planning and finance, and the significant role that council has in strategic planning and finance. If we don't have data that allows us to be able to make comparisons, to be able to see where we're at on a quarterly basis, annual basis, it makes it difficult So I'm asking for more consistency in our reports and comparisons so that we can see from last year to this year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Matties. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, no more questions regarding that, so I'm going to need a motion to consider that. We'll go with Deputy Mayor, please.
I move that Town Council accept the 2020 second quarter report for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay, so thank you, Administration, for putting this together. There is a lot of information here of what's happening in our community. There are a few questions, concerns that are raised by members of council, and that's in terms of trying to get a comparison of what we did last year. Is this, during the quarter reporting, is that where it needs to be? Or is it semi-annual reporting or year-end reporting?
Your worship, I think, I mean, if there's some concerns, I think we best discuss those as to what council wants exactly in this report. Again, I mean, this report is not meant to include all-inclusive information about each and everything that we do as a town. I mean, this is a general overview update report. Certainly, there may be trigger information in here that would, means see council wish to know more about something or specific request regarding, a topic or a data set or so on and so forth. But, if that's something that, I mean, I can maybe have a discussion with council about, try to ascertain the scope and breadth and depth of information to be reported quarterly. I mean, I think that would maybe be the best step to take on that note, Your Worship. Again, this is provided to do two things: give council a sense and a flavor. It's certainly not meant as a quarterly audited statement review. It's not meant as a all-encompassing, I mean, year over year, quarter over quarter, so on and so forth. I mean, if there's gaps in information, they can be addressed in certain ways. Certainly willing to have that discussion and commentary and try to understand what is required. But Your Worship, we do our level best to provide a report that provides some of that information that frankly remains usable to the general public, just to have an update as to, I mean, what we did in the last quarter, so on and so forth. But ever since we've started tabling this, and it's been going on probably 5 years, frankly, I think what council needs to just appreciate is that it's not meant to provide everything and, I mean, all the specifics. And if there's another way to do so, I mean, we can certainly try to do that and work with council as to what kind of information is required. But I would still continue to frame it that this is sort of a broad stroke overview of the past quarter and what's gone on in that past quarter and so on and so forth.
Okay, so I'll go back to Councillor Matties. Does that provide a little information for you of the amount of detail that you're looking for?
Concerned about is if you're going to provide some information, then make it usable to the person that's reading it. So if it's just one piece of information standing by itself, without any explanation, without a comparison, then what would be the purpose of that? I had to go back to Q2 in 2019 myself, back into the town website, so that I can evaluate the comparison. If it's really difficult, let us know. If you can't do that, then fine, I won't ask for it anymore. But I've asked for it for 10 consecutive quarters for that comparative information. So if it's not possible, then let me know and I'll quit asking.
Okay. Can you just make a specific comment to which page? Because I'm looking at, for example, the capital projects. Whatever page. So that's 103. So for example, that shows you what council approved for the budget of 2020. and then it shows you what we've spent to date.
My comment isn't with regards to the capital projects, because it wouldn't, I mean, I could go back and look at a past quarter and, or a past year and see those. You know, I mean, I wouldn't expect that you'd be listing what you did last quarter and this quarter, you know, but for example, if we're going to put an audited statement of operations, it would be nice to know what the quarter, or sorry, what it was for 2019, or, so that's on page 102. If I was looking at the same document, I'd like to be able to see, for example, like if I go back and look at 2019, I'd like to see the same financial documents, some consistency in it. So, for example, in 2019, we had a balance sheet. This year, we don't. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
And, I mean, and then the other part of it too, what I spoke about with regards to our economic development, if you look at that section, 2 sections are about the task force, supporting the task force. And there's one tiny section that describes what our economic development team has been doing. How can that be when the planning department and when we talk about the police department, fire department, and communications are all taking 3 and 4 pages of this report? So I'm thinking economic development would be one of, like, a very high priority for our community at this point. And I'm just wondering what, you know, where's the information that tells people what we're doing?
Okay. Good point. So I guess, for example, on page 102, where it has the unaudited partial statements, then it'd be nice, in your train of thought, is to have a comparison of 2019 to see where we are in terms of user sales and franchise fees, and so that we have kind of a comparison of how we're doing compared to this year versus last year, right?
You know,
Okay. Yes, and then then probably page 108, we probably don't need to have those current debt levels, because that's presented over at the corporate plan, and that doesn't change, right? Okay, and debt limits. Okay, so I think you made a couple comments. I'm sure, like as the town manager says, again, the report comes back and they're trying to highlight a few things. I don't think it's gonna get everybody what they want, but maybe this is a more of a fuller discussion amongst council to see what they want to be reported on and how. As town manager has mentioned many times, the report is done for the majority of the people out there, like the public and stuff, and for the majority of council members. So that's something that we'll debate and kind of consider for review. Is that on, town manager, is that what?
Well, Your Worship, you know, I think there's certainly a conversation to have here, you know, going forward. But, you know, and again, I think I need to be clear that this report is not meant to be a policy-setting report. It's not meant to provide council with, you know, information that leads to decisions. You know, when those decisions are required, whatever they may be, you know, they would come with, you know, more in depth and, you know, comparators and so on and so forth, or that would certainly be the intent, you know, in the vast majority of the time. You know, so Your Worship, again, you know, if there's a conversation to be had, we should certainly have that, because we don't want to be missing the mark, or we don't want to be tabling a report that we believe the intent is this, and the majority of council feels the intent should be something different. I think there, I mean, a conversation about the intent of the report, what could be or could not be in it, and going forward from there, Your Worship.
Okay. Okay, so council matters, so there is so we'll have a little more conversation to see what we'd like to see more in the reports coming forward.
to ensure the financial well-being of this community. And so when I have information that allows me to see on a consistent basis, where it doesn't matter what document I'm looking at, I want to be able to just be able to compare and just know that the state of the nation is good. So that's all I'm looking for.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else? Okay. See none. I guess my other comment then is, again, we will be using this as part of our social media campaign to educate our residents of what's happened over the last quarter. Okay. I see nodding, so we'll go forward. So I'll call the question. All those in favor for information? Okay. And that is carried. Okay, moving on to 9.3, 9.4. Councillor Meyer, please.
There we go. Sorry, are we voting for the town council to accept the 2020 second quarter report, or this one?
9.4. That was the addition that we added on.
That Alberta Urban Municipalities Association Board of Director nomination recommendation, that council approve the nomination of Mayor Choi as a candidate for the director, Towns West, of the 2020 Alberta Urban Municipalities Association Board election.
Thank you. Thank you for the motion. So, members of council, the Board of Directors seat for Towns West is up for election during our annual conference at the AUMA, and I would like to seek my name forward to sit as a director. Okay. There's the background behind it of the programming, who's all in it, and just the nomination package as well. Okay. Councillor Laurie.
And I'd like to say I'm appreciative to see your name come forward for this. I think it would be very fitting. As I read through the information, one of the lines, it talks about both the Director of Towns West is available for a 2-year term and the Vice President of Towns is also available for a 1-year term. It speaks to be eligible for Director of Towns West, the candidate must be nominated by at least 2 other elected representatives or regular members in good standing. To be eligible for the nomination of Vice President Towns, the candidate must have the nomination approved by the council of the nominee's municipality. I'm just a little bit concerned. I think, again, not only would you be a good candidate for Towns West, but I also think you would be a good candidate for the Vice President of Towns. And I'm just wondering if we would need an amendment of this motion to add in, after Director Towns West, and candidate for VP of Towns, if applicable. Do we need that amendment in order for you to allow your name to stand for Vice President should you be successful as Towns West? Or is this motion as it sits acceptable for the VP nomination if you were accepted for Towns West?
I'll ask the administration to respond to that. So, as we all know that during the AUM convention, then we'll elect a director. So there's a director of Towns West, Towns East, Towns South, and Towns North. And from the 4 directors of the towns, then one is elected as VP. And I think Councillor Laurie is mentioning that the fact that if a member wants to put their name forward to be the Vice President of Towns, they need a motion from council. So a motion like this, does that cover that, or do we need to be more specific, as Councillor Laurie says, that if successful or if applicable, then council also approves the nomination for Vice President of Towns?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just ask Brenda Otto, our General Manager of Strategic Services, to maybe provide a bit of a comment there.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Laurie and all of Council. We do need to clarify the eligibility requirement for Mayor Choi's name to be nominated for the position of Vice President. We don't have the details of the election procedures as of yet from the AUMA. It hasn't been posted on their website for this year. However, as Mayor Choi indicated, we do believe that the Vice President would be elected from the elected directors' positions, and that you know, it would be appropriate for and required for council to have a motion to nominate him in order to be listed for a candidate for the Vice President position. So I would certainly recommend council include that as a, you know, if eligible, as part of the motion. We can clarify that, and then it can proceed with that motion from council, and we can follow up on the clarity with the AOMA after the fact.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Administration, for the clarity. And I'd just like to ask then Councillor Meyer if he'd be open to a friendly amendment on that to add after Towns West and candidate for Vice President Towns, if eligible, to the motion.
You want me to say that again? Yes, I accept the friendly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Lloyd, you had your hand up?
Yes, Your Worship. Just a question here and clarity. I will be supporting the motion with the friendly amendment. But I'm just wondering though, when a person gets elected to the Towns West, there are going to be certain responsibilities that are going to be bestowed upon certain people. They will do things internally to meet the requirements of that particular directorship. There could be other things. Do we always have to add them every time? We know that they add, have a vice president. If I am trying to explain myself, that I personally don't agree that we need that. I will vote for it, but I don't think it's required because we elect him or submit his name forward, whomever we submit, and if they get elected to be forming on that Towns West, then they will accept whatever responsibilities and duties that are bestowed upon them by Towns West and AUMA.
Okay.
Your Worship, if I could
Councillor Lloyd, so that's a good comment. However, in the AUMA regulations itself, for a director to stand for vice president role, they need a motion from their respective councils. So,
I did not see that, Your Worship. Where is that?
yeah, Councillor Laurier was referencing that.
Just having gotten this document tonight, then that should have been right in the thing right at the get-go. I will support the motion.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification, and thank you for the question. Okay. Any other questions and comments? No. Okay. So thank you very much for the motion, Councillor Meyer. I'm looking forward to the nomination and going forward to campaigning to again look at the whole AUMA board as a whole, as a province. I think we need some strong leadership in there that will help us drive us to the next level of our governance structure. I believe we're in a lot of uncertainty, unrest in today's economic climate, political climate, and we need people on the board to provide that leadership. And I've been on town council for quite a few years now. I'm also part of the AMRB board, and I think I have the skills and the ability and the time to actually dedicate to this to make our communities better. So thank you. Hopefully you guys all support the motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Now it is passed. We'll move on to information items and council discussion. We'll start with Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
Nothing at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer?
I'm also going to go with nothing this week. Thank you.
Councillor Plechko?
I'm going to pass as well.
Thank you. Councillor Loy?
I am not passing. I just really wanted to say I'm very thrilled with the amount of construction that we're seeing on the 5th in downtown. And praise the Lord, we have had good weather and it continues on. And I'm hopefully that we're going to be finished because I get a lot of talk on that particular thing. So it's very good to see, and congratulations to administration and all those departments that are helping get this going. Now I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Councilor Lori. Moving on to Councilor Mattis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one comment question. It's with regards to the check signing that Council Deputy Mayor would have signed every couple of weeks checks in the past, and now that they're all electronic, my question is who on Council is reviewing the checks on a go-forward basis with that? Even if it's electronic, we should be checking.
Okay, I believe the Deputy Mayor still signs the checks that are over a certain amount. That's how it's always been. Can somebody confirm that? Or have we changed everything to electronic?
Your Worship, we have recently implemented more electronic funds transfers just to deal with our larger vendors and have put appropriate controls in place internally to make sure that nothing is released without appropriate authorization. So this does shift some of the responsibility away from Council just because it becomes a more electronic process with a lot of the controls built within the system to check for duplicate amounts and to understand those things. We're in the process of updating policy just so that those practices are consistent and that will come to Council later on in this year.
Okay, so Councilor Mattis, go ahead.
Your Worship, I spoke with an accountant recently with regards to this, and this individual said that even if it's electronic, that there should be the check and balance. So either I would like to be able to see the report of the checks, or somehow we need to be reviewing them.
Okay.
Your Worship, if
I'm
I
not too
could-
sure what the threshold is. I do remember coming into the office and signing checks because when you were Deputy Mayor, you were away. So there is still some checks and balances. I'm not too sure where that, are we still doing that?
Yes, Your Worship, and if I could add further that, so how I look at it is, Council has approved the budget for administration to administer, and we have multiple controls within place to make sure that that is being adhered to. So, the departments that are entering into those contracts or invoices are signing off to say that this is within their budget that's been approved by Council, which then runs it through the internal process, which would generate in either a check or an electronic funds transfer, depending on how the vendor has chosen to be paid. And so really that, to me, the authorization is on the budget side. I understand that that's a change for Council because they've come in and been signing checks and really seeing a lot of those details. But we just feel that this is, it's more efficient and in some ways safer because of those electronic controls that you can put in place and rely on in the system rather than issuing manual checks.
Councilor Mattis?
If I may follow up, can you to the General Manager, can you tell me how, if there was some fraud orchestrated in our community, so within the organization, a couple of individuals orchestrating fraud, seeing an opportunity, how do we know as Council, how do we protect ourselves from that?
Yeah, through Your Worship, good question. There was a lot of review put in place and controls put in place before we moved forward with the electronic funds transfer, because you do see those news stories all the time, and they're large amounts, and there's definite risk. One of the key controls that we have is around the vendors and how vendors get added to system and how we would change any vendor's banking information. So definite strong information verifying directly with those vendors, because that's typically how they will come and defraud you, is that they'll say there's change in banking information, that we would make that change and it's not correct. So I'm definitely comfortable. We've been through those controls and processes to make sure it's tight, because that's my number one concern too, that we're making sure that's protected and that nothing's going to not anyone that it shouldn't be paid to. So multiple checks in place as well as internal reviews happening before any funds are released, for sure.
Okay, and thank you. And then Councilor Matty does bring a good point about fraud. So if there's any fraud that does happen, during our fiscal audits yearly, will the auditors pick that up?
Yes, Your Worship, that's part of the external audit as well, that they ask questions around fraud and, they look for that as well. But anything that we were would be aware of, it would be discussion with them and they would have discussion with you as well. And there's a number of, there are these controls I'm talking about that they would check as well and report to you if they didn't think they were sufficient.
Okay. And then you also mentioned something, bringing something back to council?
Yes, Your Worship. With these changes, I think the policy needs to be looked at, and so we're working on that, and we'll bring to council to make sure that it's reflecting what's actually occurring.
Okay, and then I guess then that's another opportunity for council to address those questions back to administration again.
Your Worship, that's correct.
Okay, Councilor Matthews?
Your Worship, I just have one additional ask. I have also understood through the course that I've just taken that councils are generally having the opportunity to speak with the auditor by themselves without administration. And we've not been able to do that in the time I've been here. And I'm hoping that we could look at that as an opportunity that, we can ask or maybe suggest some concerns that we might have or that they could present to us without having administration with us. So is that something that we could look at implementing moving forward?
Yes, Your Worship, through Councillor Matties, I mean, that is a best practice. The auditors will tell you that, and if council feels that that's something they want to explore with the external auditor, that's definitely something that we can, in the planning phase, just get him to talk directly with you, and we could schedule that appropriately on the meeting. So you would move into closed, have a discussion with him, with not administration is the practice that if they feel that's necessary or if that makes you feel more comfortable in your role, that's something we could look at for the next year's audit.
Thank you.
And also the auditor also sends council an engagement letter, and it does state there if you want to speak to them, just contact them. So we do have the opportunity. So if you feel that there's maybe an issue that might be concerning to a member of council, then please just bring that up and we can address that. So we have that opportunity. So I look forward to reviewing that policy that you're bringing forward. Okay. Anything else, Councilor Matthews, to add?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. So moving on to Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not much to add tonight. Just again, I'd like to put the message out to the community, and I'm not necessarily sure that too many will hear it from this, but I've heard a lot of talk over the last little while about what they're calling now COVID fatigue. And it's about people's abilities to continue to deal with the stress, the anxiety, etc., that goes on with COVID fatigue. And it doesn't take much more than observing social media nowadays to see how short people are and how something as simple as a mask can cause, rather than good debate and good discussion, just sheer nastiness. And so I just want to take this opportunity to encourage our community members to remember that no matter whether it's face-to-face or behind a screen, that we are all people. We are all mankind or humankind, depending on who you listen to. But the key word in that is kind. And in our community right now, we need to choose kind. We need to treat each other with respect. We need to treat each other with common courtesy and with decency. And as I mentioned before, with the education campaign that I feel we need to go out, we need to do everything that we can do that's within our own power to protect our community and all of those who live within it. So when you get the opportunity, choose kind to your fellow resident.
Thank you very much, Councilor Laurie, and that was a good reminder. Okay. Again, I just wanted to actually have my notes here to make sure that we're aware of the construction. Construction season is very, very short, but I am actually impressed with the progress that's happening on 779 and the access road to St. John Paul II. I drive by there every day and I see the progress. Sometimes it doesn't look like they're progressing, but they are working in the background, forming the cement rails and all that stuff. And it looks like they're getting ready to do some pouring of concrete the next couple of days, and then after that, it's asphalt. So I'm looking forward to that. As well, downtown development is humming along. With every downtown redevelopment project, there's always surprises. And last week, as they're changing over some of the underground services, like the water and sewer, the contractors hit a tunnel in front of the Stony 21 building. So that was the actually old bank as well. There is a large safe or bank safe that's in the basement, and there's also a safe on the second floor, on the main floor as well. So it's kind of interesting to see why that was there, and maybe somebody was trying to rob it way back when, and maybe they weren't. But it's always interesting that through development projects we find interesting parts of our history that we don't know about. So it's gonna, hopefully we'll see some more nuggets of information coming forward to that. And also, lastly, I'd like to thank our residents of the town of Stony and Plain. I know this has been very, very stressful for many, many months with COVID-19 and what we're dealing with in terms of an economy, things that we're seeing in social media, the polarization of different political groups, just anything that's different is getting polarized. But I have to thank our residents. If you look at the daily numbers of our COVID numbers, they're still very, very low. I just checked them, they're at 3 active cases right now. So, which means that our staff, our residents, and ourselves have been very vigilant, practicing proper hygiene, staying home when we're ill, trying to maintain a 6 feet social distance around us from our non-cohort families, and also wearing a mask when we're not able to maintain that 6 feet. Our numbers are low is because our residents are following the provincial health orders. So I just wanted to thank our residents for doing that. With that, that ends the information items and council discussion. There is a closed meeting part of the agenda today, ladies and gentlemen. So any media or public members that wished to be present once the closed session is over, please notify our recording secretary or our town manager so that you can be notified that we'll be back in session. The motion to revert out of back into public and out of closed session is the only recorded motion that happens in our closed meeting. I will call a brief recess here as we accept the motion to go into closed session so that we allow the people that are not supposed to be in here the time to leave and allows us to get ready for the closed session. Okay? And then after that, we'll adjourn the meeting when we're coming back out of closed session. And if any motions are needed, it'll be done in public. And I'll accept the motion to go into closed session. Councillor Plechko. Okay. Call the question. All in favor? Okay. So we'll declare a 5-minute recess as we get the room set up, please. Right? Okay, so motion was made to move out of in-camera by Councillor Loy, and that was carried unanimously. Town manager, has anybody left their contact information to be contacted when we came out of closed session?
Your worship, I don't believe so, no.
Thank you very much. So we'll continue with our agenda, moving on to item number 12.1. There is a motion on the floor. If I can have Councillor Matties, please.
Council, 1, authorize administration to finalize and execute a real estate agreement for the exchange of Plan 2020995, Block 34, Lot 3, for Plan 1420539, Block 1, Lot 3, and Plan 1420538, Block 1, Lot 2A, and 2, approve funding for the purchase of Plan 1420539, Block 1, Lot 3, and Plan 1420538, Block 1, Lot 2A, at the price of $2,073,375. Woo! From the annual joint use agreement fees provided by Parkland School Division.
Thank you, Councillor Matties. Administration, anything to comment on?
Nothing, Your Worship, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, members of council. We've had a presentation. Any questions or comments regarding that? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to 12.2. Councillor Laurie, please.
Your worship, I'll move that council accept the annual land management report for information.
Okay, thank you. Administration?
Nothing to add, Your Worship.
Okay. Members of council, any questions, comments? So thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate having all these maps and informative data that's now on our website. So thank you very much for the staff for doing that. It makes council's job easier to pull up the data, and also allows residents that are here and residents that may be in the future, and also our developers, builders, and real estate agents to actually pull up that data quickly and effectively. Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. And that is carried. Thank you very much, members of our staff that are providing and doing the background work and providing the agenda for us. And members of council, thank you for reading it and bringing your council hats to debate and what's best for our communities going forward. So thank you very much, guys. We're adjourned.